Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuhu. There are some absolutes in this world, and we humans have to acknowledge these absolutes and understand their impact on our existence. We can't just go around ignoring things. For instance, if you are born, you will die. That is the way it is. Whatever is created has a beginning and an end. It has a start and a finish. God is one, and he is beyond mind and desire. And there are people all over the world who worship God. And there are so many different ways to worship him. The world is full of sects and religions and subsects and cults, and they all seem to have their own way to worship God. But in reality, in God's reality, in the only reality that exists, only God can worship God. Only God can glorify God. That which can truly worship him is not created. It's beyond what we understand as creation. It's different than that. It has to do with understanding the nature of God and incorporating that nature into our being. Most worship is in the first three levels of consciousness, which is sense, awareness, and intellect. Sense, awareness, and intellect don't contain the fourth level of wisdom, which is discrimination. And what does that mean? What is discrimination? What does it mean to be able to discriminate? In the first three levels of wisdom, very similar to what animals do, the world is a place of action and reaction. So something occurs, and then man or animal reacts to that occurrence. So what happens, what man does, is in reaction to things, as opposed to understanding the truth of things. Reaction means that the actions are surface. It's what appears. It's what the eye sees. It's what the senses understand. It has to do with form. And it has to do with the manipulation of form. So prayer, when it takes place prior to wisdom, is prayer that has to do with form. Prayer that has to do with, I need this. I want that. I need to change this. I need to alter that. I somehow need to manipulate form so that it conforms to what I want at this moment, and I ask God's help in doing that. So God, make things the way my mind wants them. make things the way my desire intends. This is the prayer of the first three levels of consciousness. But there is wisdom that is beyond form consciousness. There is wisdom that doesn't come from creation. There is wisdom that is beyond creation. There is understanding that is beyond creation. And to understand that means that there has to be an understanding of the qualities that are Allah and the truth that is Allah. Every creation has a beginning and an end, a start and a finish. God has no beginning or end. God is before the before and everlasting. He's other than creation. You cannot worship God through creation. You have to go beyond that. So you have to be able to worship not from your physical body, but worship from your essence, from your soul. And your soul is part of that essence, which was from the beginning. And it has no end. The soul doesn't die. The soul is part of God that has been put into each and every person. And when we can merge wisdom with our soul and begin to understand through that connection the effulgence that is God, that becomes true worship. That becomes the worship of unity. When the soul merges with wisdom, and in that merging begins to understand the nature of God, and then worships God, that is when true worship happens. And we have to search for that. We have to search for that place of worship that is beyond the intellect, that is beyond sense and awareness, that is beyond the world, that is beyond the attachments of the world, that's beyond blood ties, that's beyond wealth, that's beyond gold, that's beyond women, that's beyond what the visual eyes can see, that is beyond our attachment to everything that's around us. When we can begin to worship from that place, that's what discernment means, and that's what entering wisdom means. Discernment says there's more to this existence than form. There's more to this existence than what our eyes can see. There's more to this existence than the physical senses. There's more to this existence than any of these things. And our worship doesn't involve the physical senses. Our worship doesn't involve the manipulation of that which is physical to conform what our mind and desire wants. When wisdom enters, we discern the limitations of the mind and the limitations of the intellect, and we begin to look for the everlasting truth of existence. There's no place for ignorance there. There's no place for worldly ideas. There's no place for worldly energies, the energies of earth, air, fire, water, and ether. There's no place for them. When these energies meet the power of the effulgence of the truth, the power of wisdom, the power of God, they dissipate, they disappear. Like when the moon is in conflict with the sun, you don't see the moon. The moon has no light of its own and disappears in the sun's light. And like that, all of these fundamental elemental energies and the power we believe that they have disappear when wisdom enters into the equation, when the effulgence of truth enters into the equation, when the connection to reality enters in to the equation, when unity becomes worship. And unified worship is different than the worship for things. The worship of unity occurs when the soul merges with wisdom, and that effulgence merges with the effulgence that is Allah. When they come together, then you have a unity of worship. And in that, all of creation exists. Everything exists. But all of that is one. And all of that is understood as one. So when that merging occurs, then you are in him, he is in you, you do not exist, and he only sees himself. And therefore, he glorifies himself and he worships himself. And this is at the core of true worship. We need to begin to understand this goal. Hundreds of years ago, people who went on the Sufi path entered into a dargah, like a monastery, a place separate from the world, where the world was not supposed to enter, and where you could separate yourself from the world and focus on the study and worship of God. Focus on the discrimination to be able to tell the difference between what is worldly and what is godly, and to find how to focus on that which is godly and merge with that godliness. Now, we say, La ilaha illallah. We say, only God exists. I do not exist. What is the reality of that in our existence? Zikr is the form of worship where man disappears and only God exists, where God alone is and God worships God. Allah created everything, and Allah has given the food for everything, and he has supplied the needs for what every man needs. But the things that Allah gives to man, he doesn't accept from man. He doesn't need food from man. He doesn't need support from man. He doesn't need any of these worldly things from man. He is in a different state. He is in a state where he accepts love, truth, compassion, justice, tolerance, peacefulness, and the 3,000 divine gracious qualities. That's what he accepts, and that's what he responds to. Every other kind of inducement that we attempt to get God to react to, there's no reaction. He does not react to these other things. He only reacts to his own qualities. So he reacts to himself. He reacts to what he is. He reacts to divinity because he is divinity. So we need to understand the nature of divinity. And we have to discern what's worldly and what's divine. And we have to come to the point where that which is worldly no longer turns our heads. That which is worldly no longer pulls us in the way that a magnet pulls steel or iron. That no longer affects us in the way it did in our formative years. We have to get to the point where we understand that everything that is worldly has a demise. And if what we are looking for is eternity, then we can't hold on to that which disappears. We can't hold on to that which is temporary. So we have to do the work, we have to start the journey to leave the station of intellect, which deals with form, and enter into the station of wisdom, which deals with Allah's qualities. The point of view that comes from dealing with Allah's qualities. Wisdom functions through Allah's qualities as opposed to the worldly kinds of things like blood ties, like wealth, like attachment to real estate, gold, women. All of these things that depend on that which is material, that depend on that which is form, have to be taken out of us and done away with. Now, I'm often asked questions that have to do with gradations of things, because people don't want to understand the absolute nature of what's required. So they want to know, how far do I have to go? Well, the answer is you have to go all the way. There is no gradation. There is no stepping stone. Now, in the course of getting to the final phase, there are the stepping stones. But the point is to finalize the attachment, finalize the blood ties, finalize the need for wealth, finalize the pride, finalize the need for fame, finalize the egocentric kinds of things that man has that he repeats over and over and over again as if they were important for his life. Finalize the involvement with the world. Finalize the involvement with all of the things of the world. That stage has to come to us. The world has to die to us. And when that happens, that's when we can talk about to die before death, which is the penultimate Sufi goal, to die before death. And what does it mean to die? It means that all of the things that have a time limit disappear from you. All of the creative things are no longer attached to you. You're no longer attached to your body. You're no longer attached to your blood ties. You're no longer attached to your possessions. You're no longer attached to form. You're no longer attached to the things of this world. And you've broken free of them. Now, this is something that you can do in gradations, but you have to understand that over time, there has to be an absolute release from these things. And if that absolute release doesn't happen, then you are subject to all of the things that happen when somebody hasn't rid themselves of the world. You're subject to judgment, and you're subject to what happens on the day of judgment. To understand to die before death means that we have taken seriously this trek of I do not exist, only God exists. We must understand that as we hold on to the world, we consider ourselves to exist. As we hold on to fame, we consider ourselves to exist. As we hold on to wealth, we consider ourselves to exist. As we hold on to anything, we consider ourselves to exist. And as long as we consider ourselves through our interaction with the world, and we consider all of these interactions to be paramount importance in our life, then we can't be released. And if we're not released from the world, we become subject to rebirths because of the fact that we haven't released ourselves. When we become at one with Allah, then we see ourselves in Him. That mirror of wisdom enters into our heart, and we see ourselves in that mirror. So He becomes ourselves, but ourselves has disappeared in Him, so He sees Himself. And that's the state we have to come to, where we are in Him and He is in us, where we disappear in Him so that all that He sees in Himself, and then we are back to the state where God worships God, where God prays to God, where God intends God. And that is that state of unity. That's when you no longer have the world within you. You no longer have your attachments to the world within you. All other worship has a beginning and an end. All other worship has a time period. All other worship has a specific material intention. We need to be rid of time periods. We need to be rid of material intentions. We need to surrender to that which is that great love of creation, that great effulgence that comes from our Lord. When we can surrender to that in its entirety, then we have truly become what man is intended to become. Otherwise, we think that we are in states of bliss or states of ecstasy or states of effulgence, when in truth, we are in states of form and states of attachment to the world. When you have the world within you, you do not exist within Allah. And when you exist within Allah, you do not have the world within you. This is the state that the Sufis strive for. This is the state that the Sufis pray from. And this is called zikr. When the zikr is recited, one should disappear in the zikr. When you say Rahim, you have to become Rahim. When you say Rahman, you have to become Rahman. When you say Kabir, you have to become Kabir. When you say Shakur, you have to become Shakur. Each of the names of God no longer are abstract ideas. They are your reality. And when that occurs, then we begin to enter into the state of wisdom, the state beyond intellect, the state beyond mind and desire, the state beyond truth. Creation will never understand that state. Creation is incapable of understanding that state because creation is attached to creation. Creation is attached to form, and creation cannot imagine beyond itself. So we have to enter that part of us that doesn't have a beginning and end, that's not created, that came from the original source. We have to be in contact with that. And when we are in contact with that, then you see yourself in him and he sees himself in you. And the unity of existence becomes evident. These are the steps that we need to take. And we take these steps through involvement with one who has already taken these steps. We need a mirror to show us what it looks like to be in that state, to recognize what we are becoming. And that is the Sheikh of wisdom, the Sheikh who has traveled this path and has left the world, but has returned here for the sake of humanity to show them the truth. And if we can find one of wisdom who carries that wisdom and is a manifestation of that wisdom, we can look at that and understand what that reality is. The Sheikh is a gift from Allah to show you what it is you should become. The Sheikh is a gift from Allah to show you what it is that you need to be. The Sheikh says, become like me, because the Sheikh has disappeared. The Sheikh is not there. The Sheikh has entered into that space of unity where all that exists is God. So when there's an interaction with the Sheikh, that interaction is an interaction of justice. That interaction is an interaction of peacefulness. That interaction is an interaction of kindness, of love, and mercy, and compassion. Because that's all that exists within the Sheikh. He has no place for anything else because he is beyond that. Mind and desire no longer control him. Mind and desire no longer manipulate him. He no longer reacts to the world because the world doesn't influence him. He's not looking for what the world has to give. And as long as we're looking for what the world has to give, we can't find truth. And we are heading towards a dead-end street. And by a dead-end street, I mean we're heading towards death. Because everything that is created ends, and everything that's attached to creation ends. So our escape route is to detach from all that is created and attach ourselves to that which is everlasting, to attach ourselves to that which is reality, to attach ourselves to the Asmaul Husna and the gracious names of Allah. This is the path that we have to set ourselves on. All other worship has a beginning and an end. The only eternal worship is the worship of Him alone through Him. And we have to begin to understand that. And as long as the magnetisms and the hypnotisms of the earth attract us, we can't do it. As long as we have unresolved issues in this world, we can't do this. As long as there are things that we think we need to accomplish, we can't do this. There is a whole myriad of illusions that tells you what it is you need to do and what it is you need to accomplish. There's a whole myriad of illusions that tells you how you have to manipulate the form of the world so that everything can go on appropriately. And as long as you think that, as long as you think you have to change it, you are without the understanding of God's truth. God has transcended all of these things. He is beyond all of these things. And as long as you are not beyond all of these things, as long as we are not beyond all of these things, we are not with Him. We are in the world mouthing an allegiance to God. God wants more than our allegiance. He wants us. And how does He want us? He wants us to be like Him. So we become the Sheikh, and the Sheikh becomes the Creator. And we disappear into the Sheikh, and then we disappear into God. And then we become God. Only God can pray to God. And this is at the core of the understanding of Sufism, that we disappear into that unity. And that unity is what truly exists and has no beginning and has no end. And we have to ask to be able to understand that perfection. And our prayers should be that that perfection of worship be allowed to enter into our being, and we be allowed to participate in that perfection of worship. And we have to ask for the grace to allow us to do that, and for His protection to take us on that path. This is our plea. This is our prayer until our prayer is unity, until our effulgence is unity, until our soul has merged with wisdom and merged into the effulgence of Allah. And we ask that everyone come to know that state where they have merged with the effulgence that is Allah. May it be so for each and every one of us. Ameen, Ameen, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.